We've got some 3-word reviews from Sunderland fans. Dan on our Patreon says Agent Illan Meslier. Rich Lay on our Patreon says Mon Dieu Illan. Another Dan on our Patreon says thank you Meslier. For Leeds, Zane says Illan fucking Meslier. Tom says what a Meslier. Sensing a theme here.
Yeah.
Justin, only one place to start. Talk me through what you think happened, because I genuinely must have watched it about 100 times now, and I still have no idea what happened.
I've seen accounts on Twitter as well slow it down and really slow it down and think they've got to the bottom of it when actually it doesn't change anything. Meslier still made the biggest cock up I think I've ever seen a goalkeeper make. Actually, no, I think maybe bail Meslier out a little bit here. The Declan Rudd one for Preston against Birmingham a few years back popped into my head.
No, Justin.
No?
You're right. They're both really bad mistakes, but this happened in the 96th minute.
Okay, yes. No, you can't hide from it. You can't hide from it. Just Meslier's face. I mean, he's a man who doesn't express a hell of a lot, does he? Like I don't think I've ever seen him smile, and I don't think I've ever seen him sad. And even in this moment, like his perplexed look was still very much like just completely blank. And I was completely blank. It's one of those moments where you see Alan Brown kick it, he cocks it up, he admits he cocks it up as well, which is even funnier. And you just turn your head away, just watching it from home, and I imagine supporters will as well. You just turn your head away and think, ah. And then the commentator goes, "What's he done?" Or along those lines. Oh my God!
The ironic thing is, you say you've never seen Illan Meslier smile, but the one time he did smile was after the game, after he just made the mistake, which I'm sure went down with Leeds fans well. The only thing I can see is that maybe, and there's quite a lot of emphasis here on maybe, it doesn't bounce as high as he expects it to, because it looks like that's slightly off. But even then, surely get his body in front of it. It's just a moment of sheer madness. It is one of the worst goalkeeping mistakes I've ever seen. It genuinely is. And keep in mind, it's happened in the 96th minute of one of the biggest games of the season. It's absolutely glorious, Justin.
But how dead are his reflexes not to react very quickly? Even let's just say, for example, you're in the kitchen, right? And you knock a glass, but you catch it. Like, that's quick, isn't it? And you're not an athlete. No, we're not. No. We're not exposing anything here. You're not an athlete, but you're still quick enough to react to potentially knocking a glass over. Meslier had time to react. That ball was moving slow. There was no pace on it. Like, even if it was spinning and it was a slightly awkward bounce, like, stop a little bit. Like, you can just move an inch, and he didn't. He just stood still.
It's just mad, isn't it? It's one of those moments where you'll be looking back at it and go, where were you when this happened? I mean, I play football on a Saturday morning with a bunch of guys
where were you when this happened?
Yeah, it is.
Like a major...
I play football on a Saturday morning with a bunch of lads who don't follow the Championship at all. And even they were talking about it on Saturday morning, because it's just fantastic. It's just great stuff. It led to utter carnage with the celebrations as well, with the Sunderland players celebrating in the corner, Luke O'Nien diving off the advertising hoardings onto the Sunderland fans, and then just to kind of contrast that, you got Junior Firpo for Leeds storming down the tunnel, absolutely fuming after the game.
Yeah, it was...
I particularly enjoyed the Leeds fans as well, who said, "Whey!" as the ball tamely went towards Meslier, and then moments later had their hands on their heads. It's just sums up how mental a moment this was, Justin.
It really does. I mean, I think you already mentioned it with Hume yelling "fuck off" to someone, I don't know who. The shaky camera as well. It's the equivalent of found footage of a natural disaster. I don't think even the best director or cinematographer could have created a better scene than one the social media admin for Sunderland captured in those moments. But you're absolutely right. It's just the perfect summary of football in a moment, and what it is as a match day going fan. Because you've got the Sunderland fans who literally within a split second you go from despair of Alan Brown's really shoddy loft into the box to it being a goal, and then you've got the Leeds fans thinking they're home and hosed in this game to coming away with a point when it should have been 3. It's just the perfect sort of summary of how how football is. It's great. It's great.
Particularly enjoyed Alan Brown saying afterwards, "Luckily, I came up with the goods." In the interview afterwards, and he said it with the cheekiest little grin on his face. Just good stuff. Just an amazing moment. It really was. And while I imagine a lot of Leeds fans are very annoyed about it still, there was 95 minutes previous to that, Justin. I mean, I would happily talk about that mistake for a good hour, but what did you make of the previous 95 minutes?
Can't really remember what happened, to be honest with you. I generally can't. I can remember spells, but honestly, I think that 96th minute has just completely overshadowed what happened. In the 95 minutes before. Don't get me wrong. I think from a Leeds perspective, they bounced back from a very sluggish start. I don't think they started very well. Which credit to you for pointing that out. They did start very, very flat, and Sunderland were very, very good. But I think, from a Leeds perspective, they'll be disappointed overall. And I think it's one of those lessons for them where they were learning how to win ugly before that moment. And I think that's the main frustration, I think, for Leeds.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, a loss would have been harsh on Sunderland because Leeds had a 10-minute spell in the first half where they really turned the screw, but Sunderland were otherwise the better side for the vast majority of this game. They struggled to convert that into chances, though, in fairness. And then you've also got to give a mention to the fact that Leeds' first goal through Joel Pirro was offside as well. It was one of those where VAR would have disallowed it, but it was also so close that you can't be too upset with the linesman for not giving it. So it's a fine line, but I'll let the linesman off for this one. But ultimately, Leeds were 2-1 up in the 95th minute and didn't win. So they've thrown it away. And that's before you even get on to how the equaliser actually happened. And look, it sums up a pretty rotten week for Leeds United, doesn't it, Justin? 2 bad injuries to 2 key players and 2 games where they failed to win and were probably second best in both, which isn't ideal, is it, Justin?
It's not a fun scenario, no. But I think there are 2 ways you can look at it. Don't get me wrong. I think, like you said, I'll defend you, and I do think Leeds started flat, and they certainly weren't at their best within the game. And I think coming away with a 2-1 win is probably a better lesson for Leeds here, if that mistake doesn't happen in the 96th minute. Because, as I say, I think if they can learn how to win ugly, then the games where they're not on top, where they're not at their fullest, they're good wins. You're going to need those types of wins, and so far I don't think we've really seen Leeds have those yet. But on the other side, as I say, I think if you can draw some positives out of what is a really frustrating end to the game, and as I say, I think a draw is fair. You're not going to dominate every game. I think on the flip side as well, they've come up against 2 really good teams in Norwich and Sunderland, 2 really tough away games as well, and they've come away without losing. And I think that for me is a positive. It's just the manner in which this one panned out against Sunderland is very bitterly disappointing.
Yeah, well, I think this game just highlights many of the issues that Leeds have, and I'm not talking about the goalkeeper, even though I've never been totally convinced about Illan Meslier, I will admit. One issue is Thorupball relying so much on individuals, because we saw that last season with Crescencio Somerville getting them out of jail so often. And you had 2 examples of them relying so much on it here, because the first goal comes from a pinpoint cross by Willie Gnonto. The second goal comes from Lodger Ramazani pulling 4 Sunderland players out of position. Now, it's fine to rely on individuals, but if they're not producing, then you're buggered. And for the vast majority of this game, those individuals weren't performing. So that's one thing. Speaking of individuals, and I messaged you about this during the game, Justin, what does Brendan Aronson do? Because I've watched so many Leeds games this season, I'm still yet to learn what it is that Brendan Aronson brings to this Leeds team, which is a pretty mad thing to say about a player who cost £25 million, Justin.
I was probably much harsher in my messages to you than I would be here. I think the best way I can sort of describe him is he's perfect for the Eredivisie, I think.
It's a strange thing to say, but I know exactly what you mean.
He's got a technical profile that I think would thrive in a technical league. And I think it's why he struggled in the Bundesliga, and I think it's why he's struggling over here as well, is that it's a very physical division to play in the Championship and even in the Premier League as well, because there are a lot of teams now who want to play a counter-press, who want to get into your face, and I just don't think Brendan Aronson's quite used to that level of, I wouldn't say physicality, but the demands it puts on your body. As I say, I think he's got a very good technical profile, but I just don't think it's quite suited to the Championship. And as you say, if you think you're spending £25 million on a player, should be really.
I just don't know what he does. That's the main thing for me. I don't know what he's good at. I think if you were to really push me, I'd say he works hard. But if you're looking for someone who makes a difference in the final third, for 25 million, he definitely doesn't do that. But look, for full disclosure, I still have Leeds down as the team most likely to win the league this season because they have the strongest squad, easily, even with injuries. But they have been flat this season, and they have got to improve at some point, haven't they, Justin?
Yeah, you are right. I know I've sort of been defending Leeds this past week, but I think this game is probably a bit more of an example of them needing to pick themselves up in those tight fixtures. And as you say, don't wholly agree with the fact that they rely on individuals because they are a good side at creating chances, but at the same time they have a lineup where they probably should be doing a lot more with him in these types of fixtures. And even so, I think with Daniel Farke, I wouldn't say there's one way of playing, but as we saw last season, they were missing a number 10 at times. I think Ruta was very good at being a creative outlet for Leeds, but did go missing on occasion in games, and then others needed to step up. I don't think Leeds have that many types of players this season, or at least they need those types of players that they signed in the summer to grow into it. So I've not seen the best of Leeds yet, but again, we've got an international break where I'll say it time and time again, it's a very good time to get on the training ground, get the methodology into place, and see where they go.
Sunderland, they head into this second international break, Justin, which you were just mentioning there. They head into it top of the league. And yes, they haven't accomplished anything yet, obviously, but this is a great thing, isn't it? In this day and age where promotion more often than not is going to newly relegated teams or teams spunking a lot of money, it's a good thing and kind of cool that we have Sunderland top, having not spent a huge amount and also putting their faith in youngsters. That's a nice thing, isn't it?
Is it cool to say cool? Or do we have to say Riz or no cap?
I don't really know what Riz is still. So I will avoid judgment from that because I know what cool means.
and there lies our problem. It's certainly brilliant. So I do agree. I think it's a strategy that is brave because you have to have your recruitment nailed. These players are fresh. They're not blessed with the character element of the game yet. They're not bruised and battered by 10 years being a professional. I think technically they mostly have it. That's very obvious. But personality and the physicality is still in development. And that just emphasises, I think, how brave it is, but also the quality of coaching from Regis Lebris as well. Because, as I say, the bravery of putting those players into a team, playing them, persisting with them, understanding they're going to make mistakes, although they haven't made too many yet. That's the frightening thing, by the way. They have had a couple of games where they've dropped off, but they've not made as many mistakes as I thought they'd make. You compare it to last season under Mick Beale and Mike Dodds, by the way. It's just, as you say, it's cool, it's brilliant, it's fantastic.
It is. It's all of the above, isn't it? Because it's got to be pointed out, the Sunderland team which started against Leeds included 3 academy lads, and the rest of the starting 11 cost less than £5 million. And then you've got the Leeds team, which cost, by my reckoning, more than 72 million. So once again, this is what happens when you have a long-term plan saying, this is how we're going to do things, and you stick to it. And while it is increasingly the case that relegated sides do go straight back up, it's great that we still have, fairy tales, for the lack of a better term, like Ipswich last season, Luton the season before, and maybe Sunderland could be the one this season, because even though they are a massive club, it is a real feel-good kind of thing. I think most neutrals should want Sunderland to go up, not just because, they're a big club who should be in the Premier League, but because of the way they're doing things. It's a very admirable way of doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe admirable is not the right word, but what they're doing is they're doing it different. They're not throwing money at the wall, but also they're not signing free agents that are sort of 28 onwards. They've got a plan in mind. They've got a 3-4 year, 5 year plan in mind where they're going to sign these players. They're going to allow them to express themselves and give them opportunity. And I imagine it's probably very obvious, but the club's buying these players with the notion that they're going to sell them in 2 or 3 years' time for a big profit. And we've seen Brentford do it their way, we've seen Brighton do it their way, we've seen clubs do it different ways. And I just think, the way Sunderland do it again is a very different way of doing it. Signing young players, really young players, but it's something that's a breath of fresh air, and it's almost necessarily needed in the Championship. Hopefully, clubs follow suit.
Yeah. Well, it's going very well for Sunderland. It's not going so well for Luton Town. They now sit 21st after yet another loss. This time it was a 2-0 defeat at Sheffield United. 3-word reviews for the Blades. Lee says, never broke sweat. DJ SKM says, don't concede goals. Joss says, we're going up. For Luton, Ben on our Patreon says, change bloody formation. Skeeter on our Patreon says, not even trying. Klaus says, worse every week. That pretty much sums it up, doesn't it, Justin? These Luton performances, not getting any better, are they?
No, I said last week they're too nice. They're still too nice. How can you instill aggression into a team that has Marvis Nakamba in it, by the way? It's just bizarre. That every every bit about the Luton's philosophy going through the leagues, where they were a horrible team to play against. They're not now. They're very easy to play against. They're not angry. There's not a ferociousness about them. There's no intensity. It's bland. It is bread and butter. Don't get me wrong, bread and butter's nice, every now and then. But every week or every game, it's horrendous. It's boring. It's bland. It's just not nice.
No, it's not. It's not something I would like to be served up every single week, I've got to say. Yeah, considering one of these teams finished 10 points ahead of the other in the Premier League last season, you'd have been surprised about which one it was, wouldn't you? And I know the Sheffield United team is quite different now to how it was back last season, but watching this game in isolation, I would have been surprised to find out Luton were even in the Premier League last season, because this was pure domination from Sheffield United. It was wave after wave of attack. Luton offered absolutely nothing. It was a pretty shameful showing. And after the game, it led to Luton fans giving Rob Edwards a lot of stick. He went over to clap the away supporters. He was met by loud boos, clearly aimed at him, and chants of Edwards sort it out. And he is a man under serious pressure, Justin.
It's unsurprising, really. And, it's about the right time to probably direct some criticism his way, because I know we'll talk about Sheffield United in a moment, but the way Chris Wilder has had to change things so dramatically at Sheffield United, I don't think Rob Edwards needed to do it, but there's been no adaptation to being in the Championship. And I think this game probably highlighted some panic. That switch to a 4-4-2, I think that was maybe, I had it down as 4-4-2. They were trying to be proactive, but it felt overcomplicated. And, Rob Edwards said after the game that the changes were made for them to be more solid. They weren't. The goal showed that. They also barely looked threatening going forward. They had an inexperienced right back at left back. They had Alfie Doherty at right mid, so protection for Walters at left back it wasn't there. It was just bizarre.
It was bizarre. And look, Luton fans have been calling for him to switch things up, but the changes that you mentioned there, and Jordan Clark up front would suggest that maybe he's changed it a bit too much, because it was just strange. But even though he had changed up, the formation and who was playing where, they were still doing the usual game plan, weren't they? Of swinging in cross after cross. And when you've got a 9-foot Harry Suter at the back for Sheffield United,
eat it up.
They're just going to get dealt with easily, aren't they? So it's a shameful performance again for Luton, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better anytime soon. And it's getting to the stage where a decision may have to be made. And I get that a lot of neutrals I've seen have been criticising Luton fans for booing Rob Edwards and, giving him stick for how they've been doing this season, considering how much he's done for the club. But look, things are getting to a really dire stage, because Luton have been so shocking this season. I don't think a lot of people realise how poor they have really been. And I tell you what, if this was any other club, Rob Edwards would get sacked during this international break. Yeah. But because it's Luton, I'm not sure he will, which I suppose is a credit to them. They're willing to be patient and give him time after all he's done for the club. However, at the same time, I'm guessing Luton would quite like to be back in the Premier League as soon as, and the chances of them getting a top 6 place are rapidly dwindling, aren't they?
They really are. And I think as well, it's worth mentioning about Rob Edwards is, has he faced this level of struggle in his managerial career yet? His Forest Green Rovers were very dominant in League Two. As far as Green Rovers side, were very dominant in League Two when he got them promoted. I know he went to Watford, but I don't think we saw enough games of struggle because they just didn't give him enough time for us to see what he's really made of. And then he went to Luton, and it just worked out, didn't it? And obviously, last season in the Premier League, there was no expectation. They looked good at times, but unfortunately, they lost too many games and they were relegated. So I don't think we've seen Rob Edwards need to react to anything. And I think that expectation and pressure is built up now. They need to be winning games, and I just don't think he's coping with it, and the team's not coping with it, and the basics aren't being met. The intensity's not there. It's a really concerning state of affairs at Kenilworth Road.
It really is, and it doesn't seem like he's got the idea of how to change things based off what we've seen so far, does he? And just to potentially make things worse for Rob Edwards, he's got the small matter of the M1 derby next time out against Watford. So if he's still there and they lose that, then we could see whole new levels of anger from Luton fans in that game. Sheffield United, they would be top of the league right now if it wasn't for their 2-point deduction. An unbelievable number of websites still haven't clocked onto that, by the way. It's really quite annoying the number of times I go on a random website and it says Sheffield United at the top of the league. Not because I'm angry about Sheffield United being there. It's just like, this is incorrect. Come on, sort it out. But they have had a cracking start, haven't they, Justin? Sheffield United are the only side in the EFL who are still unbeaten, which is pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, really. And as I say, we've not really seen Sheffield United go into come out of their shell yet. And I think probably this is the first game where we saw them really start to dominate, because this is, as I say, the first game where you felt they controlled it. They were on the front foot for a lot of it, and there was a lot of energy, and it showed from the crowd onto the pitch. And as I was alluding to when I talk about Luton, it just feels like things are grounded again at Bramall Lane. The principles of working hard, being difficult to break down, they are very, very difficult to break down. They're very much on show, and ultimately, again, there's no ego there either. It feels like the ego's been wiped out of the club, and it looks like the Blades of old. You know, the team that everybody fell in love with when they first got promoted under Chris Wilder. And that will be somewhere Luton want to be, but with Sheffield United, I think Chris Wilder's parachuted them down as a club that have been battered and bruised over the past couple of years needed to be.
Yeah, I won't go as far to say the same as the 2019 team. I would say they've had a great start, without a doubt, much better than I think many expected, because there hasn't really been any hangover from last season at all, has there? Which I thought there would be, because it was such a bruising experience, getting battered every single week. So the turnaround's been great, undeniably, particularly at the back. They've only conceded 3 in 9, which is pretty mad for a side who let in over 100 goals last season. And fair play to Chris Wilder for this start as well. He's certainly had his doubters, including us, we'll admit that. But he's churning out the results. It's got to be said. However, I will say this, if I'm being honest, I haven't come away from too many Sheffield United games thinking, wow, considering the amount of talent in that squad, I would have expected more games where they've totally dominated. And also, they've had quite a generous start to the season in terms of fixtures. It's got to be said. The only game they've had so far, though, where they probably weren't the favourites is Norwich away. So I'm staying a bit cautious with Sheffield United still. I think we've got to absolutely praise the start that they've had, but I've not been as taken aback with them as I have with Sunderland, for example. So it's got to be said they've got Leeds and Middlesbrough away after the international break. So we can make a proper judgment after that, I reckon, Justin.
Yeah, that'll be a good indicator of where they're at. But again, if they come away from those games having kept them both at bay and maybe even come away with draws, I think I would be very impressed, because I don't think it's all about being a sexy, swashbuckling side at times. You just need to graft and graft and graft and work hard and keep opposition out. And I think that's what Chris Wilder built his teams on. And we've seen teams get promoted doing that in recent years anyway. So, for me, I think, yes, they haven't been amazing, but they've been good. They've been good enough, and that's showing in the table and the results and the performances.
It's now time for us to check out how our second tier bet builder and multiple with SBK got on, which included our game of the week, as well as Justin and I's 2 bankers from Friday. Our bet builder was on Sunderland v Leeds, and if you stuck a £10 stake on that, it was due to return £110. So our first selection was Leeds to have the most corners. Leeds had 1, Sunderland had 8. So, not a great pick. The most recent stats were massively in favour of that, so I'm not sure how that one went so wrong. Under 1.5 Leeds goals was our next pick, which obviously no success there. Basically, both your picks, actually, Justin, let us down in the bet builder. But we did have Jayden Bogle to be carded, which did come in remarkably in the 95th minute, and then Sunderland double chance, which came in the 96th minute. So a late rally for us in terms of half of our bet builder being correct, and then we had a £10 stake on our multiple, which was due to return £55. We had Sunderland double chance, a winner, as we say, just. We had Norwich to win, that one easily came in, and then we had Bristol City to win. Ah, come on. Just a close one, unfortunately. We were so close to 2 winning multiples in the space of 3 weeks, Justin. Oh.
A good ratio for us, that.
It really is. I mean, it's a good ratio for anyone. Let's be honest. If anyone who gets 2 multiples in the space of 3 weeks has done bloody well. Look, we've got a bit of form going now, so we're clearly the people to follow on this, ladies and gents. So we'll be back with our next round of picks in this coming Friday's preview show with SBK. Justin, let's take a quick break. After that, we'll talk about a rampant Norwich City and Burnley. Burnley. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast, and it's now time for us to reveal the winner of our latest edition of Jameson's Weekend Hero. Every single week, we're asking you to nominate a fellow Championship fan that you believe deserves recognition. Now, that could be someone who just started a new supporters club where you live, or it could be that person who agreed to drive the minibus 300 bloody miles to make it for an away day. Whatever it is, we want to find out. So to nominate your Jameson Weekend Hero for next weekend, or actually we won't be next weekend because it's international break, the weekend after that, send us a voice note now on WhatsApp explaining your nomination. The number is in the show notes, and of course, if we pick you, you'll win a bottle of delicious Jameson to share with your winner. But on to this week's nomination, we've got this message from Ed, who wanted to nominate Helen.
Hello, my name's Ed. I live in Cambridge. I'm a Stoke City fan. I've been a season ticket holder at Stoke since 2007. The person I'd like to nominate is my mum, Helen. She's a lifelong Stoke fan and has also been a season ticket holder since 2007. On Wednesday just gone, Stoke had Portsmouth at home, 7:45 kickoff under lights. My mum collected me from work in the middle of Cambridge at 4:30 in the afternoon. And she not only offered to drive both to Stoke and back to Cambridge, but she got us there before kick-off, and she got us back to Cambridge just before 1 a.m. On Thursday morning. She's been driving the return legs from Cambridge to Stoke for about 20 years now, along with my sister Hermione. So I think this deserves a big shout-out and thank you.
It absolutely does, Ed. This is what this feature is about, Justin. I want to hear about heroes like Helen. Hell's bells. Come on, girl.
Helen is a hero. My heart's genuinely warmed at that. That is lovely. Just to drive from Stoke to Cambridge every match day.
That's quite far as well, isn't it?
It's very far. It's very far. We live in Derby. I think Cambridge is about an hour and a half away. Stoke's another hour away.
Yeah.
Is that a return trip for Helen as well? Is she having to drive back, dropping Ed off at 1 a.m? Is she then driving back to Stoke? Surely not.
It sounds like it. And if that is the case, then she definitely deserves a raise of a glass of Jameson Ginger and Lime, which is what we're doing now. Helen, you deserve this one. I'm going to have a quick sip of what is quickly becoming my favourite drink, I've got to say.
Oh, yes.
Classic ASMR here on the Second Tier podcast. Well, Helen, you rightly deserve a bottle of Jameson, which will be coming your way soon. And remember, you can nominate your Jameson Weekend Hero right now by sending us a voice note on WhatsApp. The number is in the show notes, so just 60 seconds, like Ed just then, explaining your nomination, and you'll be in with a chance of winning a bottle of Jameson. You must be over 18 to enter, UK only, and T's and C's apply. Let's go on to some more of the action from the weekend then, Justin. And Norwich, their brilliant form continued with a 4-0 thrashing of Hull City. 3-word reviews for Norwich. Tance says, looking bloody unreal. Canary Forever says, I love Hofball. Aaron on our Patreon says, serious promotion contenders for Hull. Simeon on our Patreon says, back to earth. Justin Peach, another very impressive performance from Norwich City.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah, I thought Hull would cause issues, but Norwich were just scintillating. Chance after chance, Hull just couldn't cope. I think just to highlight some of the goals, the second goal, it was a Josh Sargent tap-in, but the way the play moved through the third, it was so incisive. The third was a great move as well, the Cade Gordon one. It wasn't tidy, the finish and what ensued before it, but the approach play was brilliant. Norwich just play quite slow in possession, but the way they break as well is so bloody frightening. They exploit space so methodically. And it was a great watch and a great performance. And it was one of those games where you come away and every individual's just done their bit. Maybe apart from Aga couldn't really, but Hull did have some chances. But yeah, the 11 players on that pitch were just incredible.
Yeah, Thorupball is looking very, very good. And I mean, it's been in full flow at Carrow Road, and I am thoroughly enjoying it because they were helped quite a bit by Hull, who decided to pursue with a high line even after being caught out for the millionth time. Hull also had a goal disallowed for handball, which looked questionable, I've got to say. But Norwich could have won this by more at the same time, and they were relentless. Boya Sainz, again, was sensational. Marcelino Nunes ran the game in the middle of the park, and Norwich are looking like a very class side right now. And I think a question has got to be asked, Justin, as to whether they are top 2 contenders. Because 4 wins from their last 6 means they're one of the form teams in the division right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting question and maybe debate to have. I think the thing that really does enlighten me is the fact that Thorup is still picking out things to work on, despite a near perfect performance against Hull. He mentioned that they were playing too low at times, making it quite hard to play out from the back. So that, for me, the man's thirsty. The man is thirsty Thorup. Like he just wants more out of this team, and the fact that they are playing so brilliantly now, I wouldn't go as far as right now to say they're top 2 contenders, but they're very well put together. Now, as I say, they're methodical. They've had a relatively nice run of games, barring Leeds, but they're beating the opposition and they're playing really nice football, really good balanced blends of football as well. Lots of room to keep pushing on, but the abundance of quality that they've got is just, it's probably one of those things that have gone under the radar as well.
Yeah, thirsty Thorup. That's a new one. I will go a bit step further than you, Justin. I think they definitely are a top 2 contender. Because firstly, they've got the class, because Boya Sainz, Josh Sargent, Marcelino Nunes, I think they are some of the best players in their division right now in their positions. And look, we had every right to be concerned at the start of the season after they lost Johnny Rowe and Gabriel Sara, but they've spent big to replace them, and they've now got plenty in their armoury. And we're seeing that more and more, because some of the players who they've spent big on haven't really got going yet. Mm-hmm. But you can see they're getting better and better, getting more used to the league. And even with them not really getting going, Norwich have been phenomenal recently. I talk about teams playing well but not really wowing me. Norwich and Sunderland are the 2 teams I've seen the most wow performances from so far, I would say. And I suppose it does help that Thorupball is an absolute joy to watch. And I suppose you've got to say well done to him, because new manager, new to the country, new to the league. He's made a big splash in these early games, and that's why Norwich are a side to be feared in my book this season, Justin.
I think everything you said, you're absolutely spot on. It's just very hard after sort of 8-9 games to really go, okay, yeah, they're top 2 contenders, because a lot can change. Let's say Boya Sainz picks up an injury, hope he doesn't, but it's the sort of things that can derail a team, and we're not seeing Thorupball have to react to something like that. Maybe we saw Josh Sargent last season pick up a really bad injury, and David Wagner struggled in the first half of last season to pick up form, and then they got going again when Sargent came back. So there's a lot of things here that could be at play that we need to see Thorup react to. I mean, hopefully they don't, because hopefully they don't pick up any injuries. But let's see them go on a run of sort of 3 defeats and how they react, or how they'd react to a defeat, for example. So yeah, there's still a lot to go, a lot of football to play, but they're a team that are exciting me a lot. And Thorup, I'm thirsty for Thorup, let alone Thorup being thirsty.
Wow, this taking a weird turn.
Am I getting the meaning of that mixed up here?
I think you may be. Speaking of Norwich, they have signed former Brentford midfielder Emiliano Marcondes on a one-year deal. The 29-year-old's been a free agent since leaving Hibernian. Nice to hear his name, Justin. I almost forgot he completely existed.
I don't, because he's always available on Football Manager. Every
is he?
season. Yeah, so it's just a name that's always around. Look, I think he's a useful asset, isn't he? Despite never really excelling number-wise when it comes to goals and assists, he played roles in Brentford promotion and Bournemouth promotion. I think he's a squad asset, and he's worked under Thorupball before, so despite him going completely off the radar, I think he's a useful player to have in the squad.
The Lancashire derby between Burnley and Preston ended 0-0. 3-word reviews for Burnley. Muad says toothless in possession. John says another ball draw. Gary says Parker's boring football. For Preston, Michael says robbed by linesman. Darren says cheated by linesman. Quite a fiery game, this. Loads of pushing and shoving towards the end. It certainly had the feel of a derby, but it did finish goalless. Should it have, though, Justin? Because Preston's Emil Rees had a goal disallowed in the first half for offside, which, would have been a correct call if you ignore the small matter of the 3 Burnley players keeping him onside.
Only 3.
It's a shocking decision, Justin.
3 yards onside, 3 Burnley players playing him onside. It was poor. It was poor from the linesman. And I know I said last week with the Derby Norwich incident, I don't really want to criticise, come out and criticise officials anymore because they do make mistakes, but this was a bad one. This was a bad one. I'm not going to say it's as bad as the goal line one last week with the Josh Sargent for Derby Norwich, but for 3 players in claret and blue, Preston are in white as well, so the colour difference is very, very stark. It's not good. It's not ideal.
Yeah, I mean, we have had a few calamitous decisions from referees so far this season. You just mentioned one there. I think this one might be the worst yet because he's miles onside.
Yeah,
the linesman, right? Think about it like this: he would have been in line with it because it was from a set piece.
Yeah,
so there's not really any excuse at all. It's an appalling decision, especially because, based off how Burnley played, there's every chance Preston could have won this.
Yeah, spot on. Can I bail the linesman out here for a minute?
Go on.
There was the incident, Burnley-Blackburn. Same sort of angle, same side. Linesman, same sunny day. Does a linesman on that side need a cap? Is the sun in their eyes?
Maybe. I still think he should be able to see, directly in front of him, at the same height. But maybe you're onto something there, Justin. It's an interesting theory. I'll give you that. But look, what I've just said about Preston possibly going on to win this pretty much brings me nicely onto Burnley's performance. And look, I've raised reservations about Burnley already this season on a few occasions now, but I'm finding myself getting less and less impressed with them. And I think it says a lot that we were just hearing from Burnley fans then who were also starting to criticise Scott Parker Ball. And look, I feel like I've always got to caveat by Burnley by saying, yes, they were great away at Luton and Leeds, but outside of those 2 games and the 5-0 win against Cardiff, even though they weren't amazing in that game, bizarrely, but other than those 3 games, Burnley have been so bang average, Justin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know what else to say because I feel like I'm repeating myself most weeks with Burnley. They don't impress me as a side. They had 60% of the ball in this game, or 60+% of the ball, depending on which website you've got your possession stats from, and they didn't look as threatening as Preston did. It's quite frightening. Even if they were creating from set pieces, which they're not, you could say, okay, well, they've got another avenue of creating chances. They don't. They just have no idea what to do with the ball, and I worry that not only are Burnley not winning games they should be winning, no disrespect to Preston, but you've got a team that are struggling at one end of the table, and Burnley pushing for promotion. Burnley should be winning at home. But you also have to factor in is Scott Parker actually improving players like Vincent Kompany did? The likes of Taylor Howard-Bellis really excelled under Vincent Kompany, among others. I know they were poor in the Premier League, but in the Championship they were brilliant. They were scintillating. And despite playing a possession-based game, teams couldn't get near him, but teams can get very close to the Scott Parker side. That's the big difference here, and it shouldn't be the case because Burnley are packed full of talent.
Yeah, it's a great point, Justin. You're absolutely spot on. They don't have to be this average because they have got loads of really, really good players, but they are so lifeless going forwards. And that is, unfortunately, a very common symptom of Scott Parker ball, particularly against the sides they should be beating. Because look, in the space of 7 days, they've now played Oxford, Plymouth and Preston, and they've won one of those games, scoring once. You know, I think that pretty much speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? And proves our point. And yes, they're looking good at the back. They're not conceding many goals. Yes, they're looking hard to beat. And yes, they have beaten Leeds and Luton away. But if you're going to get automatically promoted, you have to be winning the majority of your games. And Burnley are struggling to do that against teams they should be beating. So I'll go out on a limb and say this right now, Justin. I'd be stunned if Burnley finish in the top 2. Because unless something drastically changes, I'd be amazed if there's not at least 2 better teams than them. What do you think?
I don't want to make a prediction this early on in the season, but the football in which Scott Parker plays, I just don't think is good enough to play side or to beat sides that are going to defend against Burnley. And this is the key difference: is, you know, whilst they've got good individual talent to bail them out of games where they're probably not playing well, I just don't think Burnley are playing well often enough. You know, we've seen, you know, like Norwich are a great example where they're looking really, really dangerous, really dangerous. They exploit space very, very quickly in behind opposition, whilst playing a slow build-up possession-based football. You know, that's good coaching. I just don't think Scott Parker's got it in him. Don't get me wrong, I think he's a good tactician at times, but I don't think those games come often enough for him, you know, to really excel himself. So, yeah, style of play-wise, Burnley, it's just, for me, it's not sustainable in terms of getting good results, and therefore, you know, is it likely that they're going to get promoted via the top 2? I wouldn't say it's a guarantee at this stage.
I think it's far from a guarantee.
Yeah.
I'll say that much. Preston, as we say, unlucky not to get 3 points in this one, and they'll be disappointed with that, as they also will with the outcome of Militon Osmajic's charge for biting Owen Beck a couple of weeks ago. He's been given an 8-game ban and fined 15 grand. 8 games, Justin. It's difficult to say it's unfair, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's 2 things here. I think he should have been banned for every single tooth he sunk into Owen Beck. But also
probably about 8, to be fair. I mean, how many teeth could you realistically sink into?
Can I just go off cam and just
back?
count my teeth? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how many teeth I've got on my
Go
top
find your
bottom.
dog and bite into him.
Fuck no, I'll just count my teeth in a mirror. No, it's so weird. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention is the fact that Blackburn submitted a 22-page dossier on this. The man visibly bit Owen Beck. It's just what do you need to submit anything for? He bit someone. It's very clear.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Preston were apparently relatively confident of him not having a massive ban. I think they were looking at 4, maybe 6, because they thought that Osmajic, you know, admitting his guilt would be a reason why it would not be as bad as this.
It's like walking a dog in the park, isn't it? And your dog lunges for someone. It's like, he's not like that. He's not like that. You know what I mean?
It's true. It's very true. It's a very good point. But yeah, it's a bit strange because I think what they were saying was Jefferson Lerma a few years ago got only a 6-game ban, I think, for biting someone. So I don't really know how you differentiate between the how bad a bite is, but they've clearly thought he may get away with it, and he hasn't. So he's going to be out until, I think I counted it, late November, which is quite a big blow for Preston. Well, you say it's not that long, but it's a lot of games in that time, isn't it? So exactly. Let's move on to Coventry. Have now lost 5 of their first 9 games of the season after a 92nd minute winner from Shea Charles, which saw them beaten 2-1 at home by Sheffield Wednesday. 3 word reviews from Wednesday fans. Lee on our Patreon says, Danny roll. Matt says, get in there. Nick says, last minute winner. For Coventry, Sky Blue Cal on our Patreon says, change needed now. But great scenes. We'll definitely say that much. Wednesday, when they scored that, it was fantastic. James Beadle, I particularly enjoyed, giving a big need slide towards the Wednesday end when that goal went in. We will talk more about them shortly, but we're sat here again, Justin Peach, talking about another Coventry defeat. And it would be difficult to argue that it was harsh on them, I think.
Yeah, I think, conceding late in both halves is hugely frustrating, and also, frankly, not good enough, is it? Much like Luton, actually, it just feels like the team now have just become a bit of a soft touch. A lot of what Mark Robbins had built the team on was being a difficult side to break down, while being having a fair bit of swagger in the final third, but we're not seeing that, and also we're not seeing them being difficult to break down. I mean, the last goal, the Shea Charles winner for Wednesday, is a really good example. I think it was Ben Sheaffer lost the ball in the middle. Firstly, that's a crime that late in the game, losing the ball, but no one was around him. That lack of shape and inability to engage, the Wednesday counter-attack at that point and reduce the Wednesday space was just even worse. It's just like okay, well, shit, we've done that. Okay, now what do we do? And they just didn't collect themselves at all. And again, I think that's just down to a lack of leadership, both on the pitch and also, in the backroom staff. I just think they're really, really struggling at the moment. And that's those big changes they've made. I think it's impacting them.
Yeah, I'm just bemused with Coventry at this stage. Is this going to be another slow start before they inevitably pick up in a month or two? I mean, who cares at this point? Who honestly cares? It shouldn't be happening in the first place, and it's stopping Coventry as a club from progressing, isn't it? Because they should be near the top of the table. They should be looking to make that next step up, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen as things stand. And look, we love Mark Robins on this show, Justin. Coventry fans love Mark Robins. He's a bona fide legend at the club, but do we need to have a conversation about whether he's taken them as far as he can? Because it's something I'm increasingly asking myself.
What if they do pick up their form in November, like they always do, and what we're worried about, that sort of thing? But at the same time, I think things are very different, because each of Coventry's poor starts in recent seasons, they weren't playing wise as poor as they have been this season. And also, I won't say they're packed full of ego, but things are different, aren't they? Things are different. They spent big. Last season, they were betting a lot of new players in, and I expected them to make a very fast start this season because those players have been there for a year. But things just feel very complacent. And I think, again, I think losing Adi Vivesh, the assistant manager, Mark Robins, I think is a key component, because he was very old school in his approach. I think he held the players accountable. Not saying Mark Robins doesn't do that, but he was very much bad cop, and I think this team needs it at the moment. They need a bad cop in the dressing room to just tell them that they're not good enough. They've not been good enough.
I think they should hopefully be aware that they've not been good enough, but I think the Vivesh departure is really being put down as quite a big key factor here from the perspective of Coventry fans, from what I'm seeing. But look, people will point at the fact that Coventry were one penalty away from the Premier League a couple of seasons ago, and that's fine. That's obviously a good point to make. People will also point that, Mark Robins has done more for Coventry than any single man has done in a long, long time, and that's absolutely fine. He's got credit in the bank for that as well. But at the same time, this is a very talented Coventry team which has had a lot of money spent on it, and it should be doing a lot better. It should be battling to get into the Premier League, and they want to make that step up. And maybe a question needs to be asked at Coventry, whether they need to consider what matters more to them, sentiment or success. That's the big question here, and unfortunately it's a difficult question that Coventry, I think, may start to be thinking about. A massive win for Sheffield Wednesday, though. There's absolutely no doubt about that. It's the first on the road this season. Danny Rule was delighted with it. At the final whistle, he ran straight onto the pitch and over to the Wednesday fans, punching the air in delight. He was a very happy man. And it feels like this could be a big week in Sheffield Wednesday's season, Justin. A win against West Brom last weekend, a point away at Bristol City in midweek, and now a win this weekend away at Coventry. 3 tough games, and they've come out of it with 7 points. It's really good going.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And it's super positive as well, especially if they're losing games and results really not going their way prior to this week starting. So the turnaround is great. And I think maybe we're starting to see the team settle more into what Danny Rule is after. Shea Charles is looking really composed. I think he's giving more license to Barry Bannon. Also, how good was the Kasama goal in this game as well? The angle he had and the power he struck the shot with was just fantastic. So far out, we hit it with 1,000 stone cold stunners, for goodness sake. It was. I just think we're seeing. I think we're seeing the team settle into what Danny Rule is after. The philosophy's getting into them, and they're peaking at the right time, but they're picking up points at the right time just before that second international break, ready to go again straight after.
1,000 stone cold stunners.
Oh yeah. You hit that with 1,000 Stone Cold Stunners. Absolutely.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Ferocious.
Yeah, I mean, Wednesday have massively turned the corner, despite your deep hatred of Danny Rule, Justin. You know that they are slowly picking up, aren't they? And look, they did have a pretty underwhelming start, and you know, you were very quick to say that I got carried away with Wednesday, even though I didn't say anything that outrageous about them. But look, they had been very poor in that spell prior to this week, and one would hope that this is now a corner turned with them, because they shouldn't have been doing as poorly as they were, because you've got a brilliantly talented manager here and a new and improved squad, and maybe they just needed time to gel after all the new signings, but it looks like they are getting there, and we will hopefully start to see what Wednesday can properly do this season after this international break. So that's very promising. Derby 2, QPR 0, 3-word review from Michael for Derby. Sublime headed finish. I was at this game, Justin. You'll be glad to know I wore underwear this time, which Brilliant. Is progress as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I hope so. I just think going out without underwear is so weird and perverted, but yeah, I'm glad you brought it. Glad you took it next time and your nether regions were comfortable. Yeah,
needs must. You know, it did make me think maybe we should ask the listeners what's the weirdest outfit you've worn to a game. I don't know.
Have you ever forgotten to wear underwear to a football match?
That too. If you've done that, let us know. secondtierpod@gmail.com. But it was a good thing I was wearing pants after seeing that Curtis Nelson header, because that was a beauty, Justin.
Oh, Christ. Head like a traction engine. Can a header be a screamer? Because that is.
This one was.
It was just so beautiful. The neck muscles on Curtis Nelson, must be incredible. Just to generate that much power. It wasn't lofted either. It happened sort of 10 or 11 years ago, and John Eustace did the same thing, but that was a looping header against QPR. Same team. Looping header. That was a good header. But this was just pure venom. Pure aggression with that header. Oh, my God. Oof. Oof.
It's something special for a header to go viral, isn't it? And this header genuinely has gone viral. It's pretty insane, but you're absolutely right. For him to generate that much power and put it in the top bin is absolutely insane. It's one of the best headers I think I've ever seen.
Cleanest, definitely the cleanest.
Oh, so clean. It's just perfect. And I tell you what, Justin, there was a moment in this game where Derby played a really dangerous cross across the face of the goal, and who's flying in at the back post? Old Ryan the Ambe. But because he has no idea how to time the ball, he didn't get on the end of it. So we nearly had our dreams come true, but it wasn't to happen. He's now 9 games away from matching the record for the most championship appearances without a goal. And Derby were really good here. They were fully deserving of the win. I don't think that's in doubt at all. And I tell you what, their home record this season is proving to be really, really impressive and being the main bedrock for them in their fight to stay up this season. So going really well for Derby, particularly at home. One team who I was surprised to see in the bottom 3 of the league table, Justin, is Queen's Park Rangers. Just 1 win so far this season. Now lost their last 3, and it hadn't really registered with me how much they've been struggling. But they really have been, haven't they?
Yeah, I think prior to this week, I gave them some credit because I think they have been a very difficult side to be beaten. You know, their record wasn't particularly poor either. But defensively, I think you can argue that they have been poor pretty much all season. They've been conceding a lot of goals, when in reality, that's what their best trait was last season under Cifuentes.
Yeah.
You know, Cifuentes took a team that was shipping goals and turned them into one of the tightest teams in the Championship last season. Those traits just aren't there. They're so easy to play for. I think I will sympathise with the Nelson header, because who scores from that distance?
It's a worldie. What can you do?
Yeah, exactly. It's a worldie. You criticise him straight after kick-off as well. But again, the Nelson goal was so good. We're not talking about how sexy the Marcus Harness goal was either. You'd be frustrated at falling asleep that quickly after kick-off and losing the ball as well. So there is frustration there. But they're just defensively, they've just not been good enough. And quality going forward just hasn't been consistent enough. There's been moments, but it's just not consistent enough. And I think Cifuentes at the moment is just failing to find that blend, that perfect blend, that perfect balance that he was finding last season. They scored a lot and created a lot from set pieces. Not really seen that either. So just not happening for old Marty Party.
The Marty Party has certainly hit a bit of a lull, hasn't it? And I think everyone assumed QPR would go well this season because of how they ended last season, which I think is a bit of a common misconception amongst football fans. I think a lot of people expect that to happen, but it doesn't often actually be the case. I mean, a great example of that is Crystal Palace in the Premier League this season, I suppose. But I've still been very surprised at how poor QPR have been, and you're absolutely right to point out how shocking they've been at the back, Justin, because they became so solid under Cifuentes, and that is the main reason why they stayed up, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And they have not replicated those same standards this season. They have got big problems going forwards as well. 3 goals in their last 5 games. Michael Frey had a great start to the season, but in the last 3 games has looked more like the Michael Frey from last season, which isn't good, by the way. And chance creation has been poor too. They have been missing Elias Chair. He's come back into the team this week, so that should hopefully improve. Overall, though, it's not been great. But there are teams I'm more worried about than QPR, I will say that. The club don't seem that worried either because they've just given Marty Cifuentes a new contract. So they're clearly keeping the faith with him. They clearly think he's the man, and I think he's more than a good enough manager to turn things around there, Justin. And they did have a few poor spells last season as well, didn't they, before they eventually turned it around. So I don't think there's any need to panic with QPR.
No, there isn't, because we've seen the successes that he can have, and I think they do have a good squad. They have recruited relatively well. It's just about finding that blend. And again, I think this is the weird thing about QPR is, I've seen moments where I've been really impressed, and there have been moments where they have been poor, and it's just finding that balance where they can get that consistency going forwards and find that blend of being tight at the back, which is what made them a success last season.
And finally, the 7-side derby between Bristol City and Cardiff finished 1-1. Not a thriller, it's got to be said. The first half was very even. Then the first half of the second half was mostly Cardiff. The second half of the second half was mostly Bristol City. Overall, you say a missed opportunity for Liam Manning's side. Justin, would you say that's fair?
I think so. When you're at home against a rival who hasn't been great. That being said, Omar Rees has picked them up a little bit, so maybe I was a bit harsh criticising him for wanting the Cardiff job earlier on in the week. But I think, as I say, when you're at home, they started very slowly in a derby. Not quite ideal. Maybe that's the young aspect of the side that they've got seeping in a little bit. But I do think, when you're not winning games at home or not starting strongly at the very least, it's going to be a missed opportunity.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a frustrating week for Bristol City, actually, because it's 3 draws and it's 3 games they arguably could have won. And that's the kind of thing which may ultimately be the difference between them finishing in the top 6, might it? And, it's got to be said, they've got some tough games coming up as well. Middlesbrough, Leeds, Sheffield United, Norwich and Burnley in the month and a bit after this international break. So wouldn't surprise me if Liam Manning finds himself under pressure again after somewhat relieving himself in the past couple of weeks. But he's got a lot of work to do. Are you laughing at relieving? Are you really that childish? Come on now.
It's relieved himself in the past couple of weeks. What's he doing?
Moving swiftly on, brilliant goal by Oli Tanner in this game. On his weaker foot as well, he curled it right into the top corner. So well done to him. He's really turning out to be a man for the big occasion, doesn't he? And it's got to be said, Cardiff are set to appoint a new manager in this international break, according to reports. Still absolutely no indication as to who that is going to be. So if they are about to appoint someone, they've done a bloody good job of hiding it. So it's going to be very interesting to see who that person is.